Well, hello friends, and welcome to another Ask Zach. Today we're going to talk about Roy Nichols. Pretty hard not to after last week's episode on Buck Owens and Don Rich. I just felt like I had to continue the Bakersfield thing, and oh my goodness. Yeah, Roy Nichols, another one of the great Telecaster players and one of the most influential country Telecaster players. So many people heard the Haggard records or saw Haggard live, and were influenced by him. And he had such a great style of playing. And we're gonna talk a bit about his history and his gear and some of his playing. We're gonna look at the Mama Tried solo and some of his other techniques, and also talk about some kind of suggested listening. And of course, I'll have a Spotify playlist. So, all right. So if you've been enjoying the show and you haven't subscribed yet, well, please go down in the corner. Then I really appreciate all the people that have been supporting the channel, either by picking up merch, especially this is the latest Ask Zach t-shirt. This is the kind of schematic. It's of a Fender amp, and it's got the little Ask Zach logo down here. This one's really been flying off the shelf, so thank you guys. Other ways to support the channel are, you can go down in the information on this video, the description, and there's tip jar information. There's also Friends of Ask Zach, which is a way to support the channel on a monthly basis, and I am so grateful for all you guys that have done that. And, yeah, all right, Roy Nichols. So, I'm sure I was exposed to Roy Nichols from listening to Merle Haggard, and, was just really curious about him. And also there's this whole thing between Roy and James Burton about who played on certain things. And once you start listening intently, it's pretty easy to tell the difference between Roy and James Burton because of Roy's feel and also his tone. It's like if you listen to Working Man Blues, the original recording, which is James Burton, and then you listen to like the live version that's like on the Muskogee, Oklahoma live record, or other live things, immediately you hear this bigger, bouncier, still, twangy Telecaster sound, but Roy's tone was really rich, and so it starts to become more obvious. So anyway, let's get to the beginning with Roy. So Roy Ernest Nichols was born on October 21st, 1932 in Chandler, Arizona, but soon afterwards his parents moved to Fresno, California. So his family had a migrant camp. Okay, and so this was during the Depression, and a lot of people were out of work, and they had to sell the family farm for pennies on the dollar. They'd gone bankrupt, and lots of, especially Okies, but all ethnicities, were going out to California because there was work in the fields, picking cotton, vegetables, fruit, all sorts of other things. And so what they had were, these people had to have a place to stay, and so they had these camps, and they were not auspicious accommodations, but they certainly were good enough for people to live in and work in the fields and pick cotton or vegetables or whatever else. So that was the environment that Roy grew up in, and he saw gypsies come through and entertain the people at the camp. So it was also common to have some type of stage or some area central location at the migrant camps where there would be music. So evidently some gypsy musicians came through, and Roy was influenced by that to pick up the guitar. Also, his father played upright bass, so Roy started playing with his dad, but in a short period of time, he went professional, and that was by the time he was 14. And so when he was 14, he started making $25 a week, which in today's money, that'd be about $337 in 2021 dollars. So not a bad weekly income for a 14-year-old. However, in 2 more years, he had gotten so much better that he started playing with the Maddox Brothers and Rose. And so they are a very important California country group. They were one of the first groups to wear the, what we think of as nudie suits, even though they might have been made by Turk or Manuel, but they were one of the first, artists to get into rhinestone outfits. And also they were entertainers. They jumped around. They would get a little, not dirty, but they would get a little blue with some of their jokes. They had some interesting songs. And so Roy joined their band at the age of 16, and then his income went up to $90 a week, which was basically $1,000 a week in today's money. Pretty good. So while he was working with the Maddox Brothers and Rose, Buck Owens and his wife at the time, Bonnie, who later would marry Merle Haggard, another kind of George Harrison, Eric Clapton, Layla type thing, they saw him and they were very taken by his guitar playing. And Buck, wanted to play like Roy Nichols. Roy's time with the Maddox Brothers and Rose was not long. It was only 18 months, but during that amount of time, he recorded over 100 songs with them, and he played 7 nights a week. And what brought his stint with them to an end was gambling. So it was against the rules for anyone in the band to gamble, and he was caught gambling multiple times, and finally he was thrown out of the group. Well, he went back to California, and he started playing on radio shows and doing different things. And then he hooked up with Lefty Frizzell, and this is where Merle Haggard sees Roy play. And so Roy's playing. Merle sees him, and of course he thinks Roy's an amazing guitar player, and also Merle is very taken by Lefty Frizzell, and actually kind of imitates Lefty at different times. And Merle was a great imitator, and he kind of shows that on some of his live albums. So anyway, Roy leaves Lefty Frizzell because he says it was a horrible gig. He starts playing with a cousin Herb Henson, who's a DJ and has a radio show. He does that for quite a few years. Then he starts working with Wynn Stewart. Wynn Stewart is one of the kind of architects of the Bakersfield sound. He has some great tunes, probably Big, Big Love, or It's Such a Pretty World Today, are probably the best known, Wynn Stewart songs. Then Merle Haggard plays bass for Wynn Stewart for a time. And then Merle gets his Capitol deal, and he hires Roy Nichols in 1965. And Roy actually takes a pay cut to go from Wynn Stewart's band to Merle's because he believes that Merle has more potential for success. And he's absolutely right. So then during this time, it's kind of interesting because, Roy plays on some very early stuff playing acoustic guitar. And then when you get to the Swingin' Doors and the Bottle Let Me Down album, Roy's not really on it. And the big singles on it, Bottle Let Me Down has James Burton, and Swingin' Doors has Phil Baugh. And the reason for that was that, Roy was having to support his family. And so, he was going out and playing with Wynn Stewart and such, and didn't end up on those sessions. So you have this guitar style it's being created by James, but it's also being created by Roy. And in the biography, The Running Kind, Merle Haggard is quoted as saying that the Merle Haggard guitar sound is a combination of James Burton and Roy Nichols, saying more specifically that the chicken picking stuff is James and comes from James, and that the string bending is from Roy. And and really the signature guitar lick, and like in the Buck Owens episode I talked about last week, there was a big thing about having signature licks. Well, Roy created the signature Merle Haggard lick, and it's this. And at this point in time, you don't think it's that groundbreaking, but starting with a note already bent and coming down was groundbreaking in the 1960s. That was not common. Most people did not start with a note already bent and then come down. And so he not only did that, but then he landed on the dominant 7, the flat 7, which again was very, it creates movement and tension. And so again, that was not a common thing. So Roy created the string bending part, the signature Merle Haggard lick, and James Burton kind of brought the chicken picking element. So yeah. So again, James plays a fair amount of guitar, but then more and more Roy starts being brought in. Some he's playing acoustic, sometimes he's playing harmonica. And then with Mama Tried, which is what I played at the beginning of the show, that's where Roy really started to get to shine. And so now James and Roy are both playing on that cut. And so here we'll just go ahead and do kind of the quick lesson portion, and I'm going to show you James Burton's part first, which he played on a fretted dobro. And so this is James's part, and I'm playing the open D string with my pick, and then with my fingers I'm playing this D note on the G string that's on the 7th fret, and then on the 10th fret you've got this A. So you're doing banjo rolls. You're doing a forward roll, and then it's all backwards rolls. So a forward roll is, and a backward roll is. So this is the James Burton dobro, fretted dobro lick that starts the song. Slower. Okay, so that's James's part. And then he continues to play a variation of that, but it's a lot less busy during the first verse or so. Okay, now to Roy's part. And this is where Roy first really gets to shine on electric guitar. And he plays the signature Merle Haggard lick twice. You have this. So here you are up at the 12th fret. You're pre-bending it up. All right. So there's the intro. That's James and Roy's parts. Then you get to the solo, where you start to get a repeat of that, the intro motif, and you get some of Roy's style that comes from listening to Django Reinhardt and from the Gypsies, and listening to Junior Bernard that played with Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. And Junior had this very bouncy, aggressive, bluesy style. And so I'll just play it. Okay, so here's the solo. And this is the way he played it on the original recording. So you have that original thing. Then you have this kind of bouncy open string thing. No, first you have this coming up to play over the G chord. Then comes the bouncy part. Slower. All right. So then there's, on the live recording that's the live from Muskogee, Oklahoma, he does a variation of it. So this is what he does on that version. So that he does a little bit of embellishment where he does a little bit more over the G chord, and then the ending lick he does another pre-bend. He does a pre-bend for both coming down to the dominant 7 and before that. So you have the, and that's really cool. And I like the live version. The studio recording is great, but that's really, really cool. And again, in this solo, you really get a lot of, his elements. So you get kind of the bluesiness, you get the pre-bends, you get the bouncy open string things that he would do every once in a while. And just some really great Roy Nichols elements. One other, kind of technique that he would do, and I think, and again, this kind of comes from Django, was he would do these half-step bends. So you have, like in D, you have these half-step bends like he does on Everybody's Had the Blues sometimes, where, and that is a really cool bend and technique. And so again, you're hitting the 5th, and then you're taking this what note is that? Oh, it's an A flat. Yeah, you're an A flat to an A, and so that whole thing. So yeah, very, very cool. Half step bends are nice, and he had such a big fat tone. All right, so let's talk a bit about some great recordings and examples to show you, what Roy Nichols is capable of. Well, to hear him doing, of course, his best, Western swing stuff, would be this, a tribute to the best damn fiddle player in the world, which is, of course, Merle's tribute to his hero, Bob Wills. And you get to hear, Roy along with Tiny Moore, who's the electric mandolinist who played a 5-string Bigsby mandolin. You get to hear Eldon Shamblin on his early 50s gold Strat. But Eldon's mainly playing rhythm or some of the harmony lines, but you can really, when Roy gets going, especially on Roly Poly. So Roly Poly is a really great one on here. All right. This is one of the absolute gems, and this is on Spotify, and this is easy to find on vinyl. Merle Haggard and the Strangers, Okie from Muskogee, recorded live in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Wow, this is killer stuff. Roy's playing a late 50s Telecaster through a Silverface Twin with JBLs most likely, and you get to hear him really kill it on Mama Tried, No Hard Times, which is an old Jimmy Rogers tune. And that was from the Jimmy Rogers tribute album that he did, and James Burton played the original solo. But again, Roy Nichols had this way of taking whatever he did and making it his own. So, I mean, he really takes James's solo and takes it to another level and is even more impactful. Silver Wings, even on that tune, which some people think is pretty tired. He turns the tremolo on the amp and just does this really big twangy solo. Fugitive, Swinging Doors, just on and on and on. And a great version of Workman Blues. They do an instrumental called Blue Rock that's on, let's see, is that on this one? Yes, Blue Rock. That's on one of their instrumental albums. But this is just gold. Highly recommended. This is the album that you need to get. And then the second one you need to get is another live one, Fight Inside of Me. And again, you can see him here. He's got the late 50s Tele that he put a black pickguard on. And he just kills it. Here you get to hear a little bit more of his Western swingish playing, like on Carina Carina and such. They do hamming it up. And this is really fun for Merle Haggard's imitations that he does, where he imitates Marty Robbins and Johnny Cash and all sorts of, and Buck Owens. Really great album. The tones on it, killer. And another live album. A lot of people think this is the best one, and it is killer. This is where Merle went down to New Orleans and kind of was doing more kind of Dixieland influenced country music that's kind of jazzy. Great album. Another must-have. All right. Now we get to the instrumental albums that the Strangers did. So this is the first one. I like this one a lot. It's great. It's not easy to find. Sometimes you end up having to pay $20 or $30 for it, but it is great. It has the original version of Hamming It Up. It has a great instrumental version of Mama Tried. And they do Tennessee Flat Top Box, which Roy Nichols played the acoustic guitar on the original version of Tennessee Flat Top Box by Johnny Cash. So a little trivia for you there. Of the instrumental albums, this one is my favorite. This is the second one. It's called Introducing My Friends, the Strangers. And, of course, you get another picture of his mid to late 50s Tele that he had put a black pickguard on. And, of course, the Silverface drip edge twin. This one's killer. It's got Stealin' Corn on it and, Street Singer and Blue Rock and Working Man Blues. And, of course, killer, Norm Hamlet. Yeah. All right. Getting to Know the Strangers. This one's, this has a great version of Caravan on it. And it's another great one, but not as good as the others. And this one is not my favorite, but again, this is another one of them. This one was from 73. So, anywho. So those are the recordings. Yeah. So Roy, continued to play with Merle up until 1987 when he retired. And seemingly at some point in the 70s, he had some type of reaction to something or some type of neurological thing where his playing kind of changed. And I think it was around in the mid-70s. And I'm not sure what happens, and I don't want to get into a lot of conjecture, but, seemingly he had to retrain himself to a degree. And his playing was still great, but not quite as good as it had been, before that. They brought on Clint Strong before Roy left the band, and they had the two of them in the band together for a while, and that was really killer. Unfortunately, Roy was playing a Les Paul Custom or a PVT 60 by that point, which it's always frustrating when your hero starts playing some strange guitar and they go away from their original sound, but that's their thing. All right, so let's talk gear. Roy played, like Epiphone or Gibson arch tops, early on, and including with the Maddox Brothers and Rose. By the mid-50s, he was playing a Fender Stratocaster Sunburst with a maple neck. And, of course, by the time he was playing with Merle, Merle was very much into the Fender sound, and he and Merle had matching 1965, it looks like 1965 Telecasters that have a spaghetti logo, but they're maple cap necks. So that kind of limits it to being, 64, 65, which would be about the time that Roy, joined Merle's band, and Merle probably would have gotten a deal with Fender because he had a record deal with Capitol and was, seen as an up and coming artist. So they both had matching, and it looks like the pick guards are almost kind of minty green looking, but they have maple cap necks, no skunk stripe on the back, no walnut plug on the front. But then not long after that, he starts playing a mid to late 50s Tele, and it has, the string tree and the logo in this location. So that means it's post 56 and, pre, rosewood board. And then it doesn't look to be in pictures that I've seen, it doesn't look to be a top loader. So it's probably a 57 or 58 Telecaster, which, like this 57 Esquire. And the only thing he did to it, seemingly, was he changed the scratch plate to a black one. So I don't know if he had that made or he got it from Fender or what. But I think it's kind of funny in that he had a Tele that they had given him, and then he dropped it for an older Tele and then used it quite a bit, because that's the guitar that's, probably on a lot of the recordings, like, Mama Tried and, those live albums. In fact, you can see the guitar on the live albums, in the pictures. And so I'm not sure about the Live in New Orleans album, but the Live in Philadelphia and the Live in Muskogee, Oklahoma are most assuredly a 57 or 58 Tele. So, yeah, as far as picks, he used a Fender Medium, and he would, at least later in life, he would take a hole puncher and he would punch a hole in the middle of the pick. And sometimes he'd chew on the pick too to help him grip it. And some say he also liked to, kind of chew on the edges so he could get a different sound. Kind of, if you've ever had a pick that's kind of messed up on the edge, it gets a different sound to it. So, and then as far as strings, we're not sure. I talked to Redd Volkaert, in my interview with him, we talked about it, and he, wasn't really sure. In fact, I texted Redd Volkaert just today, and Redd, said probably he used, black diamond strings early on, but he said Merle had a deal with Ernie Ball going back, really early. So he probably used Ernie Ball strings, with Haggard, at least by the late 60s, and we don't know what gauge. No one knows what gauge of strings that that Roy used. I'm guessing he used at least 10s, if not 11s. Could have used as heavy as 12s, but it certainly used an unwound third string. So that would kind of lead more toward 10s or 11s, or maybe he put together his own set. So yeah, and then he had a Tele, and then into a twin reverb, usually with JBL speakers. The late 50s Tele kind of disappears by, 71, 72, and, he starts playing a black Tele that, Fender most likely gave him. Then he starts playing a lot of 50s Teles, and throughout the 70s, like on Austin City Limits and other performances, you see him with various early 50s Telecasters. Some of them have, white pick guards. Some of them have a Charlie Christian pickup and a little plaque that Danny Gatton modified some of Roy's guitars. And then, Roy starts playing a Les Paul Deluxe with mini humbuckers at Sunburst. He starts playing a PVT 60. He switches to using PV amps, using the Session 400 with a big old JBL, 15-inch speaker. And then he was using by the end in 87, he was using a Les Paul Artisan, which is a really ornate Les Paul custom with a PV Session 400 amp. So still playing great, but not quite the 50s Tele into the twin kind of sound that he had earlier on. He ends up having a stroke in 1996, and that ends his playing. And he was still kind of playing locally, but then he stopped with the stroke. And then in 2001, July 3rd, 2001 to be exact, he passes away. So, and he leaves behind just, a great body of work, which of course you can check out on my Spotify link or go pick up those albums. But, what an amazing player, what a great tone, and so influential. Even down to, Vince Gill talks about how he rolls the tone control down some on his bridge pickup. and that he got that from Roy, that Roy taught him to do that. And yeah, I think that just sounds like I would love to ask Vince to tell us that whole story about meeting Roy, but maybe someday. But anywho, yeah, what a great player. I'm kind of indebted to certain people for helping me with information on this. One would be Terry Downs, who did this kind of DVD and little booklet a while back called The Guitar Styles of Roy Nichols. And this is something I paid to download. And he did a great job on that. And there's some bio information in there. Then other information I got from Redd Volkaert, both through interviewing him for the True Tone Lounge. We talk a lot about Roy in his interview because he's a hero of Redd's and, of course, mine. And then also... those are my sources for information for Roy, besides, of course, album jackets and things like that. If you want to do a deep dive into Roy Nichols, then, get those albums. And, man, I would contact Redd Volkaert and get a lesson from him. There's probably a few people that could help you learn more about Roy than Redd Volkaert. Also, Mint Morris, who's a Texas guitarist, has a lesson series on Roy Nichols, and he does a great job on that, too. So you can check those out. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me and talking about Roy Nichols. And thank you to everyone that has supported the show. Thank you for picking up, these T-shirts, especially this blueprint, schematic one that's been flying off the shelves. And for, friends of Ask Zach, and for putting money in the tip jar. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.